Our book review feature this morning comes as a treat for those that love Africa, wilderness, safaris, animals, wildlife, photography, and experiencing different cultures. Wilderness Dreaming chronicles the exceptional life of one of Africa's most acclaimed wildlife photographers, Greg du Toit. This read details how from a young age Greg lost his heart to the South African bush and the diversity of life form that lives there. Well, and to tell us more about how he found his life's calling of photographing the most alluring creatures of a hauntingly beautiful continent as he narrates it in his offering, Greg du Toit joins us on Zoom. Greg, a very good morning to you. I mean, just in your own words, how would you describe this memoir?
Well, good morning, Lebo. Yeah, so basically this memoir, it's quite long, but if I had to absolutely sort of summarize it in one sentence, it's basically the story of a young boy, me, who grew up in a city here in South Africa, and I had a suburban upbringing, but I had a dream to discover true wilderness, to find my sort of lost Africa, as I call it. And I basically, straight from school at the age of 18, went straight to the bush and started working as an apprentice in the bush. And the story gradually unfolds, but eventually I do find my corner of lost Africa.
I mean, I believe it took you about 11 years, 4 months and 28 days from beginning, the writing process to launch of this memoir. I mean, tell us more about this.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, just when I launched the book, I looked back at when I opened my very first Word document. And yeah, it was over 11 years ago. But basically how this book started was, this continent's such a colorful place, and the bush is such an incredibly colorful place, so many different types of animals, but not just the animals, but the people you work with in the bush, from safari colleagues to the foreign tourists that I've hosted on safari. You just have all these colorful stories, but like most, they will just get lost in time. So basically 11 years ago, I sort of started waking up early every morning and just jotting down 1 or 2 of these safari memories before my day began. And then these basically accumulated. And as I recorded, I sort of saw this narrative unfold. And then I sort of chose those bits and I put the book together. And that's what you see now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, your career started in the mid-90s. Tell us more about how this photography thing all started for you.
Yeah, so for me, it wasn't really a photography thing in the beginning. It was just a passion and a love for all things wild. So, but when I was at school, in our school's Wildlife Society, we had a very special guest speaker, Dr. Ian Player, come and talk to us. And he's a famous conservationist that was basically helped bring back the rhino from the brink of extinction during the last poaching crisis. But when he spoke to us, as boys, I just listened to this guy talk, and his life was just full of adventure and danger, and I just so badly wanted to be him. I wanted to live the life that he had. So I was absolutely not sure where to begin. But as I mentioned, when I left school, I just went straight to the bush and learned as much as I could about the bush. So for me, it was all about the birds, especially the trees. I even collected dung beetles, but I was interested in grasses, wild flowers. I studied to become a conservationist. And then living this sort of incredible life here in Africa, I reached a point where I really wanted to share some of what I was experiencing on a daily basis with friends and family. So I literally just bought a secondhand camera with money from my 21st birthday and started photographing. But from the very first time I picked my camera up, it sort of clicked, excuse the pun. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is what I wanted to do with my life. And this book, Wilderness Dreaming, basically tells that story about how I launched my career as a professional wildlife photographer, all the trials and tribulations that I had to go through.
Yeah. I mean, every photographer has a signature style of photography. I mean, take us through yours and also unpack your signature collection of the African wildlife fine art photography.
Yeah, that's right. I'm predominantly a fine art wildlife photographer. So I love producing photographs that can be displayed on walls, printed nice and big. And I really see myself as an ambassador, not just for the continent, but for the wild animals, to be a voice for the voiceless. And in terms of my style, I like to get I'm as much right in camera as possible. So my whole background's from the bush. So I like to spend as little time in front of a computer as possible. So when I photograph, I'm really wanting four things. I'm looking for great light. I'm obviously looking for I'm a beautiful subject or a unique subject. And then I want a good angle and I want a good background. And only when I have those four things do I actually get a photograph. And the problem with that is that very seldom do those four things all align. And there's so many stories outside of my photography. And that's really what sparked this book was, and this book basically gives me a way to share all the other stories. I'm including, of course, many of the stories behind the photographs that I've taken.
Tell us more about, the places in Africa where you found yourself photographing some, alluring creatures on this continent.
Well, Lebo, there are many. I think every country is so special, but my story culminates in Kenya. So that's where I found my lost Africa. And this was some sort of 20 years ago. But I found a very remote corner of Maasai land in the Great Rift Valley in Kenya. And this area is really special because it's community land and you get the Maasai tribe that live there. But they are pastoralists, so they don't grow crops at all. And not only that, but they don't eat wild meat. So you have this very interesting scenario where you have people living and coexisting with wild animals. And I'm not just talking about sort of buck and things like that, but you get lions there and large mammals like buffalo and elephants. And basically what I wanted to do to prove to myself that I'd found this wild sort of lost Africa was I wanted to get a photograph of one of the lions that live on this community land. And I thought that would take me a week, to get, but these lions are really different in that they are strictly nocturnal. And of course, to survive on community land, they've learned to avoid humans at absolute all cost. So what I thought would take a week actually ended up taking me 15 months before I finally got a photograph of one of these free-ranging lions.
That's such a fascinating story. I wish we had more time, but thank you so much for talking to us. Greg du Toit is an acclaimed wildlife photographer, and he was talking to us on Zoom about his recently published memoir titled Wilderness Dreaming. Beautiful book there. Get yourself a copy.